everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So, almost out of nowhere, back in 2013, it was announced that we're going to make a new Die Hard movie and it's going to be rated R. And when I heard that, I said, this is good news. While I thought that, Live Free or Die Hard, or Die Hard 4.0 as it was called here in Europe, was a fine movie. It didn't feel like a Die Hard movie per se. The PG-13 rating sure as hell didn't help that thing. It was just a movie that felt like an action movie starring Bruce Willis, and we had waited so long for that movie to come out, so it was a little bit of a letdown in my opinion. But when I saw this movie that really should have been titled A Good Day to End This Franchise, I said to myself, now this movie made the fourth Die Hard movie look like Terminator 2 or something like that, because Jesus Christ, this movie has so many problems on so many levels. I don't quite know where to begin, but let's begin this review of a not very good action movie. And it is called A Good Day to Die Hard. So John McClane has just landed in Moscow. Why is John McClane in Russia? Well, simply because that his son, Jack McClane, what a great name by the way, is arrested and is going to be on trial for an attempted assassination. This has, implications in the top brass within Russia with, a whistleblower and a corrupt politician and various other things. And in the middle of this, John McClane's son. Now, father and son hasn't talked that much to each other in recent years, and John McClane thinks that this might be his chance, to come a little closer to his son, and maybe he can help him and stuff like that. And it turns out, however, that Jack McClane is working for the CIA, and he's actually trying to work a little game here, and he's working to try to stop a illegal dealings with uranium or something like that. It's not that important. It's not important who is chasing them and what type of boring goons they have to dispatch in order to stay alive, because after a little while and after an arguably very, very exciting car chase, father and son McClane is on the run and being threatened by various people within the Russian top brass, and they're gonna have to try to figure out who they can trust and if they can work together in order to fix this thing. So there was this trend in the early 2000s and a decade and a half after that, as action stars of yesteryears were starting to go to these countries such as Romania or Bulgaria or Czech Republic and make cheap action movies which somehow made these countries look like absolute shit. It looked like somebody's backyard's backyard, and if a tornado and a meteor shower and a fucking asteroid would hit it, it would bring 50 billion euros of improvement, because my god, it made those countries look like absolute dog shit, while they have fantastic architecture and history and culture and stuff like that. But somehow they decided to show them from the worst side possible, but I don't know why that is, but that was the case. This looks exactly like that type of movie. The car chase is really shot in Hungary, and it barely feels like we are in Russia, and the Russian backdrop just makes this movie feel cheap somehow, despite them having a pretty big budget. This movie feels lightweight, maybe because of the 98-minute runtime. We'll get to that in a second. But this feels like the world's most expensive direct-to-DVD action movie that has ever been made. Add to that a very boring and very ill-motivated Bruce Willis, who seems to do this movie out of a contractual obligation, not a desire to return to the role that made him a superstar. Unfortunately, he also has to share the screen with Jai Courtney. Jai Courtney, who has done one entertaining role in his entire life. And basically every other movie he has starred in, he has just been the most boring, uninteresting, character in the entire movie. He makes paint dry look interesting. Unfortunately, in this movie, he brings Willis down to his level rather than Willis bringing him up to his level. And they have terrible chemistry together. And we also have to talk about the ridiculousness of the action sequences now. In Die Hard 4.0, we had a bunch of really over-the-top, ridiculous nonsense action sequences, but it kind of fitted that movie somehow. In this movie, when people jumps out of buildings and fall several stories and then just dust themselves off, and that this was more of a minor inconvenience, it killed the entire movie. You know, when they do ludicrous stuff like that in a movie like, The Fast and the Furious or something like that, it works because it is a live-action cartoon and you kind of expect that. But this is not a sequel to The Fast and the Furious. This is a sequel to Die Hard, one of the greatest action movies of all time. Not entirely a logical or realistic movie, but at least they tried. This movie feels like the world's most expensive shoulder shrug. And in the end, we just had one of the most uninteresting, confusing, and unappealing finales I've ever seen in an expensive action movie, when they go to Ukraine and to, the Chernobyl sites and, dick around with a completely new villain. Oh, by the way, the boring villain that we start this movie with actually gets switched to another villain who is equally as boring. And I cannot from the top of my head come up with a single movie that had a budget over $50 million, that has had a duller and more uninteresting villain than this movie. I mean, Timothy Olyphant from the fourth Die Hard movie was a really boring and bland and uninteresting villain, but compared to these numbskulls, he feels like fucking Hans Gruber. Jesus Christ, this is dull and boring and bone dry, and it also feels lightweight because of the short runtime. Now, I am not advocating for Hollywood to all the time make these overlong movies that, should have been a lot shorter, like The Negotiator, which I've reviewed, last year. The thing is that the 98-minute runtime that this movie has, as I said, make it feel lightweight, and it doesn't make it feel important. Because of the shorter runtime, it feels like they're being forced to, both speed this movie up in order to, cram the entirety of the story into a, more compact runtime. But on the other hand, it also makes the movie feel a lot less important. And because the movie is never allowed to breathe, we're just going through this very, soggy and sluggish movie where it feels like nothing is really happening while, stuff is happening. So it is at the same time boring, and at the same time it feels rushed without it being a fast-paced movie. If this movie would have been, concentrated to one location, if this movie would have been structured like a Dread or something like that, and if it would have been intense, and if it would have been exciting, then the runtime would have benefited this movie. Now it doesn't. Now we just have a Bruce Willis who has checked out, alongside with a boring sidekick whose chemistry together are absolutely dreadful. Chased by villains, we don't know what they want, nor do we care what they do. And when they're trying to pull a ruse on us, we just feel like, okay then, I guess that's the way you're going to go. And in the end, it just felt like this movie didn't matter at all. It also continues the depressing trend of the fact that every single Die Hard movie is less good than its predecessor. We began with one of the greatest action movies of all time. We followed that up with a vastly underrated, incredibly entertaining sequel that is almost as good. We then continue down to a very exciting, explosive movie that maybe didn't feel entirely like a Die Hard movie, but at least we had Samuel L. Jackson and we had lots of cool action sequences. And then we, decreased down to the fourth movie, which is just a very well-produced and slick action movie starring Bruce Willis that happens to play a guy called John McClane. while that movie, as I said, is really good, it's still not as good as the previous ones. But this is where it really fell off a cliff. Apart from the really, really exciting car chase that actually gave me a little bit of a hope, everything that happens after that was just a little bit, it happened. So while not being a cinematic abomination, this is about as forgettable as a movie can ever hope to get. If you have never seen this movie, don't. In my opinion, you should really stop watching the Die Hard movies after the third. You can see the fourth. It's a good movie. It's a, in place, really good movie. But the three first are really, really awesome movies, which should be watched and should be admired and should be remembered for what they are. Action royalty. This is action peasantry, or something like that. I don't know what it is. A Good Day to Die Hard is a boring, slow-moving, short and cheap-looking movie, despite having a huge budget and at least one big star. It's not a terrible movie, but it is a dull, bone-dry movie that I cannot give any more than 26 points. This movie is not very interesting, this movie never goes anywhere, and most importantly of all, this movie is really, really dull. So which one is your least favorite of the Die Hard movies? Comment below and I'll see you next time for, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.